Hi, my name is Alessandro Gangelosi and that's a new tip tutorial coming from cgcookie.com for Modo cookie. This time we'll see how we can use the replicator, a very interesting feature coming from Modo. It's really useful to render a huge amount of mesh inside our scene. Um, you have to imagine that we have the possibility to create duplicates, for example, using the instance inside Modo. Uh, but you have to imagine that the instances are inside our scene, so we have the complexity that will be more and more higher using more and more duplicates using the instance or using the normal duplicate command. We can use the replicator that give us the possibility to create all the duplicates just at render time. So you have to imagine that we have a scene without the duplicates. We can see just the bounding boxes for every single mesh. And you have to imagine that when we launch the rendering, all the duplicates will be generated. So we can say that the replicator are not the basic shader tree items, but we can see it inside the items list. You have to imagine that we can talk about something similar to a surface generator, because you have to imagine that in real time the surface will be generated just when we launch the rendering. It's really important to say that all the replica mesh created using the replicator can be rendered using all the feature coming from Modo. So we can use the global illumination, we can use the reflection, refraction, caustics, and all the other stuffs we can imagine that can be used inside the Luxology software. Uh, the main problem is that the replicator cannot be changed or manipulated using the standard manipulator inside Modo. So you can see that the instance can be treated as normal mesh, so you can work on it without problem. And the problem is that you cannot do the same thing using the replicator. Um, Using the replicator, you can create thousand and thousand of replica for your model. You can render billions of polygons without the need to have a huge amount of memory or a more powerful workstation. Working with the replicators is really simple. We have two mesh. We have the first mesh that will be called prototype, and the prototype is the mesh you'd like to duplicate. It's out inside your scene. And then we have the point mesh. And the point mesh is the mesh where you'd like to attach all the duplicates you are creating. For example, you can imagine that the replicator is really useful when you work, for example, to create grass, or for example a huge amount of rock inside a mountain, or for example if you are creating something like a forest, so all the trees and all the vegetation can be created using the replicator. You have a lot of parameter for the replicator, so you have the possibility also to create randomic uh, changes to the distribution and to the basic transformation for the duplicates. But let's see how we can use it. And I'd like to create a really simple scene. And to create this scene, I'd like to merge a mesh coming um, from the model content. So let's go inside the mesh, and we can select, for example, this one. Okay, and we have it. You see that we have our basic scene, our basic mesh inside the scene. And I'd like to make a little bit more complex the scene, so let's go inside the material editor and let's select the body material, and I'd like to make it with some reflection. So let's use 100% for the reflection, for the Fresnel reflection, and let's use 85% for the reflection amount, and let's use blurry reflection with maybe 16 rays. Let's use less roughness, so 10%, maybe a little bit more, 30%. Okay, so you see that we have a complex model that must be rendered. Let's close the material editor, and then we can go inside the model code layout, and I'd like to add a new layer. So you see that our mesh is really little, so let's create a box, and let's use 120 segments for the X and 120 segments for the Z axis. Let's create it. You see that we have a huge amount of faces, but I'd like to change it again, so let's go for 240 or 360 and 360. Let's use one there, 360. Okay, so we have a huge amount of face. Let's exit from the box creation, and we can call it point mesh. Okay. Then we have to create a new item. That's the simplest way to create the replica. Let's create a replicator, and you see that we see it inside the item list, but the icon is different. Right mouse button over the replicator properties, and we have the properties about the transformation for the position, rotation, and scaling for the complete amount of duplicates. Then we have the instancing information, so we have the possibility to choose the prototype mesh, the point source, and to decide how we'd like to attach the instanced geometry to the point source geometry. And then we have the include child items option, and that's really useful when we are choosing as prototype a group. So we can select to use also the child, so all the mesh we have inside a group or any connected mesh, and we can use everything to create the distance. Then we have some option for the rendering, and you see we have the render density and the display density to decide how many instances will be visible inside the rendering and inside the viewport. And then we have all the parameters for the randomic variation for the position, the rotation, and the scaling. So let's select the prototype for the animal mesh, and the point source will be the point mesh. Okay, you see that we created a lot of copy of the mesh. So let's go inside the render, and you see that the renderer is preparing the render. And to be faster, we can change a little the shader. So let's go inside the open, let's select the body material, and let's remove the glossy reflection so it will be faster to be rendered. You see now it's really fast. Let's close it. Okay, and we have all our mesh inside. You see that in the viewport we see just the bounding box, and in the rendering we see the complete rendering. Let's try to move our camera. Let's wait a little. It is, and you see that every single point you see there is a replica of our mesh. We can move to be near our mesh, and we are talking about thousands and thousands of mesh, and we have no problem to manipulate the scene because we have no mesh inside the scene actually. let's move near our mesh. You see that now I'm going near our duplicates, and now we can wait for the update of the render. You see that it is no slow because it's really fast. And now we can go again inside the properties for the replicator. Sorry. Okay. Replicator. And we can say that we'd like to use, sorry, the polygons to position our duplicates. So we'll have a duplicate for every single polygon we have inside our mesh. And you see that the rendering is updating. And then we can say, let's close the transform, and let's say that we like to have a randomic twisting over the y-axis, 360 degree. So every single mesh will be rotated in a randomic way over the y-axis. You have to imagine that if we have a little bit less phase inside our scene, it will be really faster to be manipulated. And then let's use a random scaling, for example 85%. So you see we have bigger animal and little bit animal, really little as this one. And on the scaling you saw that we have the possibility to use also uniform scale as I done actually, or you can use a scale value for every single axis. Let's move the camera down and let's go near the animal. Okay, you see we have a lot of animal inside our scene. And to make a more complex scene, we can go inside the directional light, and we can say that this light is a physical sun. And let's use, for example, let's change before the environment, and let's use physically based daylight. Then we can go back there inside the light, and let's select the directional light, and let's say, for example, time 7, and let's remove the aids 0.2, so we have less aids. Then we can go inside the renderer, and let's say that we have no ambient light, so ambient intensity is set to 0, and then we can set to enable the global illumination. We have to wait for the preparing of the scene, but you have to remember that we are using billions of polygons, so it's normal that we have to wait a little bit. And then we can go inside the environment, and let's check the last thing, and it's okay for the moment. Then let's select the environment, and let's use less intensity, so maybe 0.3 is too less, so 0.6. Okay, and then we can launch just a final test render to see how it is fast to prepare a scene. So let's go inside the render. Let's use a better quality for the anti-alias. Let's use 32. Let's go inside the render before we can set the resolution, and let's use 900 and 400, and let's make a render. As you can see, the mesh are not so complex, but we have a lot of mesh. So you can see that actually we have uh, around 20 billion polygons, and we are rendering the scene without a slowdown. It's really fast, and we are using also the global illumination, the physical light, and the reflection. And you see that the replicator is a very really interesting feature, and it's amazing to see how it is fast to manipulate millions and billions of polygons. So it's really useful to create a lot of duplicates for your mesh. Let's wait for the latest bucket. Okay, and we saw the final render. So for the moment, that's all. I hope to see you again on Modo Cookie to check for new tutorial coming from cgcookie.com. Thanks.